morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this edition of the SRE Practitioner Series. I'm your host, Suresh GP, and we are here on our episode number 12 of the Practitioner Series. Over the last 11 episodes, we have actually had a lot of conversations with practitioners, and I was looking at who should be our guest for our 12th episode. And this was something very close to my heart, but I would first introduce our guest today. Our guest today is Richard Hall, Global Head of the Global Functions Transformation at Standard Chartered Bank, based in Singapore. And SCB and his team has gone through a great journey of SRE for the last year and a half to two. So I thought it would be absolutely appropriate and honor to have Richard share his real-world experiences of going about implementing SRE and how our community can get benefited from the lessons he's going to share. So thank you so much, Richard, for joining us all the way from Singapore. And we have been really honored to have you as part of our episode. So give us a little bit of an introduction about your journey so far. And what does this global head, global function transformation mean?
Okay, let me first introduce myself and just say thank you for the invite. I think this is a great opportunity for us to share, the challenges that we went through in driving our SRE journey and continue to go through. It's a continuing process. My background, I've been in banking technology for about 30 years now, so quite a long time. Seen quite a lot of change in that time. My background originally was in sort of financial markets technology, mainly on the delivery side. But about 10, 12 years ago, I moved into risk management technology. So I ran risk management technology for a number of banks. Over the last couple of years, I've moved more into the support side. I ran when we had a centralized support function across all of group functions, which covers everything from risk, finance, HR, compliance, property, audit, all of those sort of horizontal functions within the bank that support the sort of customer-facing businesses. I've moved more into a sort of support and production support role. About 2 years ago, as you said, Suresh, we changed our model quite significantly. We decentralized the support back into each of the individual domains. And I was asked at the time by my then boss to look at SRE. And frankly, I didn't know a lot about SRE when I was asked to do this. So it was a fairly early journey in the education of SRE, and obviously I quickly bought the Google book and started to understand exactly what was going on.
Right.
So that was really the genesis of SRE at SCB. We basically decided that this was something that we wanted to do. The concept seemed really right up the alley of what we were trying to do. We were trying to make our support organization more efficient. We were trying to bring it closer to the delivery organization, so the guys actually writing the code, but also keeping a level of independence, but really trying to make the entire organization more efficient. And I think that's certainly been one of the key drivers for us in adopting SRE over the last 2 years.
Right. So in terms of the site-to-lab engineering itself, when you are interested to drive this transformation, I know that transformation is a pretty painful game sometimes when you go through it, because there's a lot of road bumps towards the journey. So how did you go about approaching the SRE transformation from the functions perspective? And I think you can have an end in the mind, but it's all kind of fluffy and it's so difficult. So how did you go about structuring? I mean, basically, what was your approach? What was the big picture that you had in mind? What is the outcome that you are envisioning as part of the SRE journey?
So the first thing I'll say is our big picture was quite small to start with. So we decided that, because there was a lack of expertise on SRE within the organization, within my organization, we decided that we would keep our initial focus very small, right, and prove for a number of different scenarios, i.e. different types of applications, whether SRE was worth pursuing or not. So really, the first step was to establish a small team of what we have now referred, or we now refer them to as SRE evangelists. So this was a team of guys that had an engineering background, but also a support background. And I think we had 5 selected. We put them through a fairly intense training right at the very beginning to really understand all of the principles and practices of SRE. We were fortunate in that we managed to get some time with Google. We spent some time with one of the SRE practitioners at Google for around half a day, going through all of the challenges and how they've approached SRE. So it was very, very useful to us to understand what Google thought were the fundamentals that were required for SRE. And I will talk a little bit about those in a minute. And then we picked, as I said, we picked literally 5 applications out of a portfolio of around 200 applications in group functions or global functions within Standard Chartered. We said we will do a pilot. We will give ourselves 6 months from start to finish to prove that we can adopt SRE, train up the team, get them actually start using SRE practices, and actually then adopt SRE fully, and then showcase that back to us at the end of the 6-month period, and actually try and identify what had changed. What were the differences that we were seeing? So this was our initial approach, and what we decided we wanted to do from the very, very beginning was we wanted to make sure that for each of these applications, we engaged with not only the delivery teams and the leadership of those delivery teams, but actually with their business counterparts. Right. So we got the people that are the end receivers of the platforms, of the systems, who were impacted when things went wrong, involved in the initial conversations about SRE. So we explained all of the principles of SRE, the foundational principles of SRE to the business and what it meant to them. What does it mean when you breach an error budget? It means we take control back effectively into the SRE team, and we can stop functional change if we think that is the right thing to do.
Right.
So getting that engagement very early and then involving them throughout that 6-month life cycle. So when we did a number of things where we played back progress, we had the business in the room at the same time. Right. So not a case of us doing it to ourselves, we were doing it in partnership with the business. And what was very interesting about that was over time, and as we broadened the scope of the transformation, the feedback that we got from the business was incredibly valuable. And by also engaging them early in the process, we started to hear about what were the problems. What are the real things that are going wrong? We see the incident tickets and we know, oh, that one's a repeat incident, so we need to address that. But actually fundamentally understanding, what are the things that they're doing manually? What are the things that, are effectively toil on the business side rather than necessarily toil that the technology team are doing, so that we could start to also focus on how could we automate some of those things. So the other thing that we did, as part of our pilot scheme was I had previously established a small automation team, right, who were very much, so this is prior to us doing our SRE transformation. We set this team up really because we had a very, very significant issue with what I call low priority incident tickets. So we had, lots and lots of low priority incident tickets that were actually eating up a huge amount of manpower across the support organization. But in a lot of cases, the amount of, or the work that was being done on those tickets was very, very minimal. Often literally we were opening a ticket, closing a ticket, we were reading the ticket, looking at it, saying there's no action required and closing it. So we had set up this automation team to look at how could we automate away some of that work. So it was sort of early stage of toil. So we'd sort of done one of those things right up front. And that was really integral then to us establishing how we could support the SRE program during the life cycle. So each of the evangelists that we had was given one application. They had access to the automation team to help automate toil away, to help onboarding observability tools, et cetera, et cetera. So we had this small team of automation staff. We had a small team of SRE practitioners who were really driving the adoption. And then what we did was we also established very, very early in the day that we needed an education program, a proper education program, not just sort of telling people to go read the Google book. I mean, no matter how good that book is, sort of not as good as being trained and then being able to put those things that you're learning into practice. So we did establish very quickly, and obviously you're aware of this because you were quite heavily involved in it. You know, we partnered with you and the DevOps Institute to build out our SRE education. You know, three levels of sort of hierarchy. So we had you know, effectively a foundational level, a practitioner level, and then a leadership level. You know, really, really powerful. And we put over the I don't know how many people we've now put through the courses over the last 2 years, but it's in the hundreds.
Yeah.
Across, and we've now broadened that out across the entire bank. So the model that we designed for functions is largely used by every team in the bank now. So that was really the sort of the approach that we had.
No, I think one of the things I want to highlight, Richard, what I really inspired me during the course of working with you guys was you were very particular that it's not just about the functions that should be enabled with the training and certifications. You just opened up and you funded this whole thing, which was, I think, is phenomenal. If you look at the entire value chain being focused towards reliability, everybody in the value chain that I spoke with was talking about reliability, which was a very different ball game altogether, because you still have certain people who was working on that part was thinking about it. And the concept of evangelist and reinforcing that part throughout was really good. And just to give you a stat, I think we have trained over about 1,000 plus 1,200 till date that could have spin off. But one area that I was very particularly wanted to ask you was, when you picked up the 4 or 5 applications, because a lot of people, when we talk about, ask about legacy systems and monolithic applications do not really fit the bill. So how did you tackle that? Was it the kind of a perception within the business owners about taking these applications which were legacy to drive towards SRE?
With our pilot, our 5 application pilot, we deliberately picked a varied portfolio of applications. So we had one application which is extremely modern technology, full CI/CD, fully automated deployment, you know, cloud native, but actually was running on premise. So it had been built cloud native, but we were not quite ready to put it on the cloud at that point. That was one application. We picked a SaaS application. So we had a application that was you know, running in a third-party vendor's data center. The software was provided as a service. We had a lot of interfaces going in, so we had a lot of data going into that platform. And you know, we said, how can we deploy SRE for a SaaS platform? And let's come up with a model as to how we can do that. We picked a vendor app that runs on premise for us. So we picked a platform that, you know, where we're largely managing all of the infrastructure, we're managing the configuration, we're managing all the interfacing, we're managing everything but the core code. And then we picked a legacy platform. So something that was, you know, had been around for a number of years, running on old technology, clunky, you know, something that you would not think this is appropriate to deploy. You know, you just, it wouldn't be the natural. And what was very interesting actually was that we managed to succeed with every one of them. And what I'll talk about a little bit now, which is a little bit of a diversion from sort of the question, but the reason we succeeded with all of them was because we managed to convince everybody who was involved that this was the right thing to do. And actually, when you get, and you know, a lot of what we have done, and a lot of what I would encourage people to think about if they're talking about moving onto SRE with a vengeance, is that, you know, the technical side of SRE is pretty straightforward. You know, you can train people. The training is straightforward, and you guys, you know, the DevOps Institute, TaUB, have got some fantastic training programs now that are defined, and you know, I would recommend that people use those. but what they don't train, and what we didn't train, was the mindset transformation that's required.
Right.
And the mindset transformation is quite significant. It's not just the people you pull in from a support team to join the SRE team. It's not the engineers you pull in from the delivery team to join the SRE team. It's not the business people. It's all of them. And actually, we found the most challenging group was actually the delivery engineers, convincing them that this was the right thing to do. The business in general bought it. They understood, if we do this and it makes my platform more reliable, I'm happy.
Right.
The support teams suddenly realized if they were given responsibility for fixing problems, then actually that's going to make their lives easier as well. Right. So getting that mindset change was also very good. I was lucky in that my CIO totally bought into this, right, as did all of the domain CIOs underneath him. So, you know, my peers within the organization were incredibly supportive. You know, we spent a lot, I banged it into them repeatedly, the benefits that SRE would bring. Right. And frankly, I think they were fed up of me saying it after a while, but were very happy when it delivered positive results for them. So I think, you know, to come back to your question, if you've got the mindset transformation right, it doesn't matter what application you use. Right. You can deploy. You don't have to deploy every single item that's within the SRE toolkit. Right. Certainly, you know, you can significantly improve the performance of your applications. We had an example of a very old data warehouse running in Africa that basically was used for collecting data that fed into our financial reporting platforms globally. Ancient system. Whenever we had problems, it was generally a 12-hour outage. The business, you know, literally had to stop when the system was unavailable. And the result of our SRE transformation, I actually had a business colleague come onto one of our calls. So we had these sessions where the business joined us, and he said, I just want to illustrate the difference that this has made to me, because he said, when I had my recent service meeting with my service manager, he told me I'd had 4 outages that month, and I didn't know about any of them. And he said, if I'd had 4 outages in the past, it would have resulted in my team staying till 3 o'clock in the morning, because the system would have been out for 12 hours. We would then have to do our work until, and he said, and he explained to me that the work that the SRE team had done, so both in observability, but also in auto healing. Right. So they had basically built in some auto healing into this platform. And we're talking about an old data warehouse running on technology that was 15 years old. Right. They'd used some modern tooling, so the likes of Rundeck, to basically identify a problem, work out what was required to be done, and then do it automatically. And so they actually recovered the platform automatically, and the business didn't even know it had happened. That's great. Still automatically raised the ticket. We still categorize the ticket as something we call a service at risk, but it was non-impactful. So it did not impact the business in any shape or form, and they didn't even know about it. That's great. And that was the feedback I got directly from one of the, he said, he said in all the years that this system has been around, he has never seen anything like it.
Now that's a demonstrable business benefits and outcomes. The proof is in the pudding, right? You can do all of those things.
So yeah, it literally doesn't matter what type of application it is. You can deploy SRE to pretty much anything.
Excellent. So what are some of the challenges that have to be addressed? I know that this has been a kind of a marathon race to do it. I think you did talk about the mindset, but there are any specific challenges when we went about implementing? Because again, doing a pilot is one part. When we try to do it at scale, there's a different parameters that come into play, isn't
it? There's a couple of challenges, I would say. Mindset is the biggest, to be honest with you. I think really getting people to think in the right way. And the example I just gave with the African data warehouse, the thing that made that successful was the SRE lead that we put in place. So the evangelist went in, trained up the team, and the guy that was running that guy that was running that team, he just got it. He just got it. And he literally was an evangelist within his own team. And so his team got it. And they just took the ball by the horns and ran with it. I mean, it was fantastic. So complete, that was a scenario where the guy got it. The mindset change was almost instantaneously.
Sure.
We had a number of other applications, and just to give you a bit of context, we've now deployed SRE within group functions to over 100 applications.
Wow.
We're about 60% through our portfolio, and we're completing the remaining ones. We've sort of gone for the more business critical ones first. We're now working our way through the lesser ones. So, we're not talking about 5 apps here. We're talking about over 100.
Sure.
And so the challenges are generally mindset across the board. So you need to make sure people understand what it means. What are the challenges? So the challenges are actually mindset, number one. Number two is, I would say, is getting people to think differently about how they measure the performance of their systems.
Sure.
Because if you look at a lot of observability and monitoring that's in place historically, and certainly we were culprits of this, it was measuring the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And it was generally measuring infrastructure.
Right.
So it wasn't actually looking at what your application was doing. We could not trend whether an application performance was deteriorating.
Right.
So when you're looking at defining SLIs and then your SLOs on top of that, it's really, really important to think about, how do I define 5 or 6 SLIs that are actually going to tell me how my application is performing? Right. Rather than trying to define 50, get 5 good ones or 10 good ones and really, really understand how those work. Then once you start to collect that data, you can use it to trend, you can see things happening. This was one of the things that Google said to us when we met with them. They said the 2 most important things with SRE for them were the blameless post-mortem
Sure.
and observability. Understanding what your application is doing and being able to react when you see something that is unusual.
Absolutely. That's spot on. I think it's been very heartening, Richard. So what does the future look like for SRE at SCB? I think you've got to that state of maturity and you kind of spreading your wings bigger. I know that with my conversation with the teams, and I think we would have close to about 2,000 people now in SCB alone on enablement. But you also have a concept called SRE by design, which is, I think, is a very interesting part. Can you kind of run through us what does that mean?
Yeah, I'll take a step back before I get to the SRE by design thing, because one of the things we did at SCB, which I think has been a real success, it was a slight failure at first, but then it became a success. So because we had decentralized, the vertical businesses had their own SRE teams, our enterprise technology team, which manages all our infrastructure, had an SRE team, and then group functions had an SRE team. We were all at very different levels of maturity.
Right.
And what we realized was that we weren't sharing best practice across the different teams. So I am co-sponsor with 2 of my other sort of senior managing directors at Standard Chartered of our center of sorry. Let me start that piece again.
Sure.
Do you want to ask the question again, and I'll
do that.
I completely forgot what the COP stands for.
So the community of practice.
It is practice.
Okay. Right. So
let's try that one again.
Yeah. So let's say. So what does the future of SRE at SCB looks like? Can you run us through it? At what were some of the lessons learned, and how do you want to progress forward on this particular direction?
Okay, certainly an area we are really, really pushing at the moment is something called SRE by design.
Right.
SRE by design came out of a realization that we, as an organization, had sort of different levels of maturity across our different business units of SRE. So we established an SRE community of practice. I'm one of the MD sponsors of that with a couple of my colleagues from the different business lines. And one of the work streams that we set up within that was SRE by design. So we're trying to now bring best practice across the entire organization. We're sharing best practice across the different groups. And we've seen a massive improvement in the way that each of the teams are now performing because we're doing that. And SRE by design is really about how do we shift SRE left, basically. If you look at the way we tended to manage things like observability monitoring in the past, it was something that was often tagged on at the end of a project.
Yeah.
It was an afterthought. And one of the things we are now really pushing with the whole concept of SRE by design is really trying to get the concepts of SRE thought about at design point. So when we're designing the system, let's think about what we want to measure and let's embed it while we're building it. Instead of tacking it on at the end, let's really embed it at that point of design. Now, that's something that's obviously going to take us a while to embed in the organization, but it's definitely something that we're really now trying to push. And the way we're looking at doing that is, do we embed an SRE in each of the project teams so that there is that person constantly chipping away at the delivery teams, making sure that they are thinking about, observability, stability, reliability, all of the wonderful things that we need. We all know that the world is now 24/7. Nobody expects their systems to be unavailable these days.
Right. Yep.
And so, I think the more we can push left on some of these things, automation is crucial. So again, being able to automate as much as possible, remove that manual toil out of the world is it's absolutely crucial for us. But I would say SRE by design is really focused on getting that mindset. Again, it comes back to that point about mindset. It's getting the mindset in the guys designing the systems to think like an SRE, to think with a support hat on effectively. Excellent. And I think if we can do that, then we will be in a much better position going forward. We'll remove a lot of the noise that happens further down the line. And one of the things we've done internally within group functions is we've built our own sort of observability platform that we're now plugged it into our development environments. So it's also being deployed into production, but the focus has been putting it on development so that we can now get observability on development as well as in production. Because in most cases we don't have any, or historically we never had any of that in development. So being able to do that is going to be really powerful going forwards.
Excellent. I think it's been quite an inspiring journey, Richard. Now, what is your final thought for someone who are contemplating on whether we need to go the SRE journey or not? Because it seems to be an uphill battle. So where do we start about? So what would you give an advice for organizations that's striving from a production support, PSS model operations towards an SRE model? What do they need to keep in mind to drive it, and what should be their thought process to make it happen?
I'd say there's a couple of things. Number one, make sure you engage with all parties in the life cycle. So, as I said at the beginning, getting the business on the journey early is incredibly powerful.
Right.
Because actually, when you talk to the business about, I'll give you another example. We do the bank's liquidity reporting in group functions. Now, if you've seen any of the crises that have hit the world over the last few years, the one thing that regulators are worried about is liquidity. It's the ability of the bank to pay its bills, basically.
Right.
So, we engage the liquidity business because actually for them, stability is more important than functional change.
Right.
So, with that business, they were like, this is fantastic. Are you telling me that you're actually going to put stability at the front of the queue for a change? So, right. If you do that, then suddenly you have a force that is pushing you in the right direction and also pushing the delivery teams, the guys that are designing and building the systems.
Right.
So I think that is absolutely crucial. I think the other thing is you need to seed your SRE teams with not just support people. So you don't need to just say, oh, we're going to rebadge our PSS or a production support resources and pretend they're SRE. That won't work. Correct. We've done that in a couple of examples, and it's not been as successful.
Right.
But we literally have SREs now that fix code.
Yeah.
A problem will happen, they'll fix the code, they'll run it through our automated testing, they'll deploy it into production the following day. So as long as it meets all of the checkpoint gates, it's fine. It's the same principle as they have a separate branch in Bitbucket. basically they are managing incidents that and they can fix them. We don't have that across every application, but certainly that's something that we're trying to get to. So I think those would be a couple of things. I think the final word I would say is don't fear it. Learn about how it's worked at other organizations. There's some fantastic documentation. Google give you the entire book for free online. Sure. They are the experts at this. And the other thing we've done, which has also given us a bit more sort of ability to expand the value that we're getting out of SRE, is look at sort of customer journeys end to end. So instead of just doing an application, we're now looking at the life cycle of multiple applications where there are dependencies within them. So data feeding between applications. We now are looking at certainly we have observability that enables us to look at those, and we can get SREs from either of the teams working together to fix problems when they occur. The other thing is, if SREs, if your application is reliable, the SREs can do more work on the change side as well. So,
absolutely, I think it's been a great pleasure. Some great, inspiring, real-world examples that have taken us through the entire 30 to 35 minutes, and I really appreciate that. This would be a valuable session for all of them who are aspiring to be an SRE, or they are in the midway of the journey to take it forward. So thank you so much, Richard, for taking some time.
Thank you very much for having me.
And sharing your insights. So viewers, I hope you had enjoyed the sessions, and look forward to seeing you all in our next episode of the SRE Practitioner Series. So please do subscribe, comment, and we look forward to seeing you next time very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.